This is Chapter 4 of Jane Yolen's The Devil's Arithmetic. "How did you do that, Grandpa?" Hannah asked, turning around. Behind her, the elegant meal, with its many plates, goblets, glasses, and silverware, was gone. Instead, there was a polished table on which a single wooden bowl sat between two ornate silver candlesticks. A black stove pouring out heat squatted against the far wall. There were shelves on either side of that stove, filled with crockery, pots, and linens. Several strings of onions hung from the ceiling. The room smelled of fresh baked bread. "It must be the wine," Hannah thought. "It's giving me daydreams." "Well," the question came from behind her in a woman's voice, strongly accented, "is he coming?" Confused, Hannah looked around for the speaker. "The prophet Elijah?" she asked. "And do you think the prophet Elijah walks in every time you open a door? A goise de verto. There's a fool in every house." The woman was dressed in a dark skirt covered with a smudged apron, an embroidered blouse with sleeves rolled up, and a blue kerchief on her head. Her bare arms were dusted with flour. Standing at a low table near a sink, she was pounding bread dough. Hannah was stunned. It was as if she'd suddenly been transported to a movie set. The illusion was so complete, she couldn't even find an answer. And then, when the words the woman had spoken came to her, a goise de verto, it was a Yiddish phrase that her grandfather used all the time, and which she never understood before. Yet now it was as clear as if she could speak the language herself, a goise de verto, as the peasant says. "So, Chaya, is Shmuel coming or not?" The woman did not look up from the dough as she spoke, but continued to beat it with a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Hannah looked out the door again, as if it could offer some clue. Since she'd opened one door to this daydream, perhaps going through another would bring her home again. It was worth a try. Taking a step forward, she saw that the man crossing the field was much closer now. She could make him out clearly. He had a thick black beard and a full head of black hair topped with a cap. His shirt was full-sleeved, and the loose-fitting trousers were pushed into the tops of high leather boots. What Rosemary would give for such boots, she thought. The man was no longer singing, but was whistling a vaguely familiar song. When she realized it was day anew, she laughed. "Oh, I get it," she muttered, though she really didn't. But she decided in that instant to play along. Whether it was a dream or an elaborate game, she'd show them all that she was a good sport. It was certainly better than Grandpa Will's deadly dull Seder lessons. "He's coming," she said, turning back to the woman. "Good. Set the table. And be sure to use the Sabbath cloth. This is a special occasion, after all. It's not every day my baby brother is to be married the next morning." She wiped her hands on the apron. "Well, Chaya, move." Chaya? But that's my Hebrew name, Hannah thought. The one I was given to honor Aunt Ava's dead friend. Weird. She wondered how the woman knew that name, then laughed under her breath at her own foolishness. Of course this woman knew. She was part of this crazy game, this crazy dream. But even as she thought that, Hannah felt a panic pressure in her chest. Where was she? And where were her parents and Aaron and Aunt Ava and the others? She stared at the door again as if it held the answer. "Why are you standing there looking like a canned fool, Chaya? The cloth, child! I swear, the fever that carried your poor parents off, may they rest in peace, has done you more damage than we thought. It was a miracle you survived at all. And well, that was surely part of God's orderly plan. Its meaning is beyond me. Sometimes, child, you make me wonder." Whatever it was the woman wondered never got said. Just then the bearded man marched into the house, having dropped his hoe somewhere outside. He grabbed Hannah before she could protest and spun her around. "Hello, little niece. Give your almost married Uncle Shmuel a hug." Hannah knew she had no Uncle Shmuel. Certainly no one as big and bearded as this man, who smelled of sweat and grass and horses. But his joy was contagious. She gave him a hug. "Put her down, Shmuel," the woman scolded. She's still recovering from her illness. You know how easily she gets upset and forgets things. And go wash yourself. I wonder that Fag ever accepted the Shadchan's offer for your hand in marriage. You are so much of a prize that you can kiss women without bathing?" She held out a large flowered bowl filled with water. "Not such a prize?" asked Shmuel, as he dipped his hands into the bowl, slopping water over the side. "I have all my teeth and all my hair, 2 fine work-horses, a 4-room house, and 20 acres of land beside. I work hard, and I do not smell all that bad, little Chaya?" Without waiting for her answer, he lifted the water to his face and continued washing noisily. "What is the child going to say, Shmuel? She adores you. But it will be a very crowded house with another woman if you do not bathe regularly, even though the new woman is that jewel Fag." Shmuel reached out and pinched his sister on the cheek. "Do you adore me too, Gittel?" he asked, laughing fondly. Annoyed, she drew back from his touch, and a pin shook loose from her hair. Making a wry mouth, she removed her kerchief and drew out the other 2 pins. Her thick black hair cascaded down to the small of her back. "I adore any of my brothers the day before they get married," she said. Then, with a swift movement, she wrapped the hair around her hand into a bun, which she pinned on top of her head again. She put the kerchief back over the hair and knotted it securely. Hannah watched silently, trying to take it all in. How could she be both Hannah and this Chaya whose parents had died of a mysterious disease? She knew that she was Hannah. She knew because she remembered. She remembered her mother and her father and her brother Aaron with his big blue eyes and great smile. She remembered her house with the jungle gym in the backyard and the 17 stuffed dogs in her bed. She remembered her best friend Rosemary, who'd had braces the year before she did and had showed her how to eat jelly beans with them on, even though you weren't supposed to. She remembered her school in New Rochelle. She remembered she forgot to be a good sport, and her eyes began to fill with tears. But the man Shmuel and the woman Gittel didn't seem to notice. They were too involved in their own conversation. "If you would accept Yitzhak the butcher's offer, you could be married and living in a fine new house in the center of the shtetl," Shmuel said, "and then you would not have to share your kitchen with Fag or anyone else." He turned and winked at Hannah. "Yitzhak the butcher is a monster. All he wants is a nurse for his children." "All butchers are monsters to someone who refuses meat," Shmuel said. "And he only has 2 children, not an army. They're young enough so that you could be a real mother to them, and you are young enough that you could give him even more." "Ha!" Shmuel turned and smiled at Hannah, signaling her closer to his side. She was hesitant to go. What if by moving closer to him, she became more Chaya and less Hannah? What if by accepting the reality of the dream, she lost her memories of her actual past? She wouldn't move. No one could make her. But Shmuel's smile was so genuine, it reminded her of Aaron's. He held out a hand. "Come, Chaya, or do you think me a monster like Yitzhak?" She moved. Close up that she could see, there was a band of paler skin around his forehead, which his cap must have kept shaded from the sun. And he had the bluest eyes that she'd ever seen, bluer even than Aaron's. In a loud conspiratorial whisper, Shmuel said, "She is still waiting to hear from Abram Morowitz, who went 3 years ago to America, promising to send for her. But why should he send for her when he has not bothered to send even so much as a letter?" "I would not go to America for Abram Morowitz, even if he sent 1,000 letters. I will live and die in this shtetl, as did our parents, and as did their parents before them. That is how it should be." Gittel's mouth was set in a firm line, and she shook her finger at her brother. Shmuel began to laugh, letting it start deep down in his belly and then rise higher and higher. After a bit, Gittel joined in. At the last, the two of them were laughing so loudly that they almost paralyzed by their own silliness. Poker-faced, Hannah stared at them. Nothing they had said seemed at all funny, but that she had understood them at all seemed miraculous. For the more they talked, the more she realized that they were not talking in English. They were speaking Yiddish, and yet she could understand it, every word. Perhaps of the strange things in the dreams, this was the strangest. She suddenly remembered going to the United Nations with her 5th grade class and sitting in the big council room. The different representatives had all spoken in their own languages, French, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, and she had listened with earphones that carried translations of each speech. With one earphone off, she could hear both languages going at once. It had fascinated her. This was a lot like that, except that the English translations were going on simultaneously in her head. It was totally illogical, but dreams, it seemed, had their own logic. She must have made a noise, some small whimpering, because suddenly both Gittel and Shmuel stopped laughing and looked at her with concern. "What is it?" Gittel asked. "Are you all right? Does anything hurt?" And when Hannah managed to shake her head, Gittel turned to her brother. "I swear, Shmuel, city living does damage to the soul. When our brother Moishe and his wife, may they rest in peace, left for Lublin, they had happy souls, and their little Chaya, so they wrote, laughed all the time. But this grave little whimpering bird is out of a sorrowing nest. Look at her. Look." Shmuel put a protective arm around Hannah. "She had been through a lot, Gittel. And remember how you and I and Moish were when our parents died. And we were so much older at the time, too. Besides, she is still not recovered in her strength. Do not worry. She'll smell the good country spring and eat new-laid eggs. She'll help you with the housework and me with the plow. We'll put weight on her and color in her cheeks. The laughter will return." "From your lips to God's ears," Gittel said, "for he certainly knows there's enough sorrow in the world, on the countryside as well as in the city, especially these days when laughter is our only weapon." Shmuel laughed. "Do not let Faig's father hear you say that. He insists only studying the Torah will do." "I hear Reb Baruch is a solemn man," Gittel said carefully. "Solemn? He would make a donkey look like a joker," said Shmuel. "Shmuel, that is your father-in-law you are talking about, the good Rabbi of Vask." But she laughed and turned to Hannah. "Come, Chaya, help me set the table. We must eat and get to bed early. Tomorrow there's much to do." Hannah was silent through the dinner, fully expecting the food to fade away at her touch. She was surprised when it tasted real, not like dream food should have tasted, but she ate little of it, much to Gittel's annoyance. "And how, my brother, do we put weight on bones when she doesn't eat?" Shmuel shrugged and didn't answer. Hannah was silent as well when they led her into the room she apparently shared with Gittel. The whole household seemed so reasonable. She had to keep reminding herself it was all a stage setting in some kind of elaborate dream. Again and again she tried to pinch herself awake. All she got for it were sore spots on her arm. At last, when she climbed into the hard little bed they insisted was hers, wearing a cotton night shift that was also somehow her own, and Gittel had drawn up the poofy goose-down comforter over her, Hannah let out a long sigh. It was a lot like one of her mother's sighs, and she bit her lip, remembering. If she tried hard, she thought that she might even remember her mother's smell, a combination of face powder and Chanel No. 5. "Poor little bird," Gittel said, smoothing Hannah's hair and touching her cheek. She smelled of soap with an underlying of onion. "Do you miss them still so much?" Hannah nodded. "My mother," she said, "and my father, and—" The rest of the words didn't seem to come. Her head began to spin. "Never mind, little Chaya, never mind," Gittel said. "Shmuel and I, we are your family now."